Hi everyone, I've been here with my buddy who I've never met, but you still feel like a friend to me and an ally, Ryan Albury. And we're here to speak about why we no longer teach men to integrate their inner feminine. And I chose to invite you for this conversation, I think yesterday, Ryan, because I'd been participating in a thread that you posted on your Facebook wall, and we seem to be similarly inclined to cause some recalibration of people's ideas through somewhat provocative ways and words, and I was intrigued. And I think the thoughts that you brought there around why you think it's actually potentially even hurtful, like damaging, for men to go around with the idea to integrate their inner feminine. That was it's kind of radical when you look at the scene in a way, but I think on many levels it resonates with my own experience as a man, but also as a guide and mentor for men.
Hmm.
And I've noticed with the men that I'm working with lately myself is that more and more I'm bringing them to a place where they in a way become less vibrant, less shiny, because there's a shine that they have which is fake, and it's based on this idea that you need to be like a radiant man or something like that. But it comes through the channel of this particular teaching. And then maybe I tell them to cut their hair or whatever, because for them it's wrong to have long hair. I know you have long hair, but it's not right for every man to have long hair, and it's just energetically true. And I tell them to cut their hair, and something completely changes in their field, and all of a sudden they start thinking differently, and this sort of new age shine diminishes, and then they become more contained, but they become way happier.
Hmm.
Like it's not even comparable. Like their life starts really working
Hmm.
for them, so they become less shiny and way happier. And I think this something about those things that don't fit well with the ideas that we have around energetics and men and da, 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 and women, feminine, masculine. So this is a bit of the frame that I'm bringing. So I'd love to hear, Ryan, why this is so important to you right now, and maybe a few words about what you do as well for those of you who don't know you.
I'm a yoga teacher, a shamanic Reiki practitioner, a breathwork facilitator, a men's work facilitator. So I've been immersed in the fluff, the nice, the new age, the comfortable, the deep, the shadowy, the masculine, the feminine, the polarity, all of these conversations for many, many years, probably about 8 years. Um, and what I started to notice was that the males that I was working with, the ones that were the most depressed, worst off financially, most lost, uncertain, confused, were the ones that were most associated with the quote unquote new age. Now, of course, that would have to be defined, but what I mean by that in a slang term is like the sort of new age. So I can't use the word to define the word, but these sort of practices around whether it's tantra or yoga or circling or ecstatic dance or festivals and these all that sort of school of thought. And it was really about getting in touch with of course our inner world, but then immediately the conversation is right there in those spheres of like the feminine side. And then
Mm,
it's this why I became
mhm,
so passionate about it was because it was this like this nobody could ever define to me what that meant. They're like, oh well, you're more receptive and you're more caring and you're more. I'm like, I have to be in touch with my feminine side to be receptive and caring and know how to listen and know how to follow. Like, I'm following you right now. Does that mean I'm
mm,
in connected with my feminine? I don't think so. I don't feel that. So it became passionate for me because I'm from the men's work world, we have this term shadow watcher. And I'm like, there's a big shadow here. There's something happening here that's massive. And I'm watching all these men suffering very deeply to the point of killing themselves, like very deeply suffering, not just a little bit,
Yeah.
not just a little lack of success, deep, deep, deep. And I came to a place where I was like, this can't go on. This can't go on like with men suffering like this. And that was, there's many other reasons, of course, but that was a massive aspect of that, was like this idea that they have to be soft. And we look at books like
Mm.
No More Mr. Nice Guy, and these books that are very much focusing on love, relationships, and that as the focus rather than purpose as the focus, and that get in touch with your feminine side as a strategy to have better relationships or get a relationship, was just something that I was seeing so profoundly. And I said, this has got to stop. And it started when I looked up the definition of feminine. Like uh, I started to really see how deep the roots went when I looked up the definition of masculine and I looked up the definition of feminine, and it was nothing like the way that people were using the word. And I was
What
like,
did you
okay,
find?
I don't have the exact definition
Uh-huh.
right in front of me, but basically it was something like uh, that which pertains to the qualities, traits, values, whatever, of women and girls. And I'm like, well, then what does that
Hmm.
mean? Like, how do we define that? Because in this culture it may be this or this, and in that culture it may be that or that. So now how do we call it an energy? And I started going into the scientific side. How do we call it an energy if it's actually a collection of mental activity? And I started to really break it down into
Hmm.
the sciences, physics and chemistry and biology and psychology, and say, where does this word energy come in, and where does it make sense chemically, like with testosterone and the proven scientific benefits of testosterone, to start having female thoughts, like female approaches, if what we're saying is masculine and feminine energy, but what we're saying is masculine and feminine psychology. Be more caring, be more gentle. Like, well, where does that arise? In the mind and intention, and how that affects
Hmm.
us at every level. And I was like, this doesn't make sense top to bottom. And the reason why I fight it is because it's like, there's a better way that's easy, obvious, and all it takes is taking a look and realizing the mistake, and then we can go somewhere with it. And that's why when you mentioned this call today, I was like, yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely, because this is very important stuff. Like, this is a gift for everybody, not like how the extremists say, oh yes, this is the way and this is a gift. It's like, I genuinely believe that this is a huge gift for everybody to start looking at these words, masculine and feminine and polarity, and
Yeah.
what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman and what is male and female and this whole thing. Because I mean, look at the suffering on the planet. I'll pass it back to you.
Well, it seems clear that people are interested in it. I just posted a teaser about how we're going to have this conversation today, and it already created a rich conversation. And so I think people are curious about the labels. Are they mental concepts? Are they pre-existing physical attributes? Are they, yeah, what are they? And just naming here that I've had a little bit of trouble with your feed. I hope that you watching you can see Ryan just fine, but sometimes I think StreamYard that we're using is the incoming feeds is actually worse for me than it is for you. So my hope is that you can receive Ryan just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was my curiosity. It's like, let's have this conversation. Let's see how it helps people, because I'm still in the inquiry about how to exactly articulate my, well, shall we say, developing ideas on this topic. And part of it is to engage in rich conversation and potentially debate with people. And one thing that I experienced on the thread that you posted was I got a lot of pushback from um, a man who was clearly well established in the personal development world, and in terms of age could be considered an elder. I don't know how old he was, But he took a stance that the that you were like an immature boy for even entering into this conversation, and I entered into this conversation as well on your thread. And furthermore, I was an immature boy for even suggesting that this teaching of integrating the feminine was maybe not all that it had been cracked up to be, you know. And so there was this um, interesting emergent feeling is like this guy doesn't actually have any arguments. He's just telling me that I'm immature and like animating ideas from the 1950s, and he can't actually mount a credible defense of his position. And I felt like I was really respectful, but he ended up blocking me. And I was thinking to myself, like, that's weird, man. Like, it should be really easy for you to mount a credible defense of this. And I think it's interesting because this is one of the great victories of the parental generation in terms of kind of the cultural um, conversation around what it means to be a man, like to open up to feelings and emotions. And it's important for a man to have a heart and sensitivity and be able to cry and all those things. But the idea that you already touched upon, that that should be somehow associated with him integrating his inner feminine, is frankly offensive. You know, that as a man, I don't have a heart unless I integrate the inner feminine. I'm some numb knucklehead that can only like beat things to a pulp, you know, because that's what a man is. And so this is your idea of who I am as a result of the things that I believe in and that Ryan believes in. Like, have you even considered how ridiculous that seems? Like that a man doesn't have receptivity, that he doesn't have a heart, that he doesn't have attunement, that he doesn't have sensitivity unless he becomes more like a woman. That is like that. For me, that is a very interesting observation, and I think that we represent. We're right now at an emerging part of this conversation, and I think it's more than a conversation. I think we're literally discovering who we are at a very basic level, under all of the ideas that have been propagated for all of this time, because clearly these ideas are not functioning well for all of these men that you and I work with. We see it. um so it's like now we have to work and probably be demonized a little bit to actually bring something new, I think. And that is the idea that men actually, we're not knuckleheads that can't feel for shit unless we integrate our inner feminine. It's pre-existing in men as long as we are true to who we are, to feel, to have a heart, to love, to attune to a woman. Like, and the idea that that isn't possible, that has to go. That's where I'm coming from. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Where I get fired up is when emotions are defined as feminine, where connection is defined as feminine. You know, like any type of relationship, the connection is like, so I mean, I look at things in and this is funny for me because most of what I say is like, we could just change the word and then it's fine. You know, like we have to get in touch with our emotions.
Yeah.
We have to understand what they are, how they work at all levels of science, how to deal with them, how to not suppress them. And like we could just change the word away from feminine and then we're saying the exact same thing. Now there's, how are you going to go about doing that? That's another conversation. But it doesn't need to be associated with feminine, because if we look at feminine, it's like femme, female, in a lot of these sort of counterculture or like new age or like progressive fields. A femme is like, you know, in the sort of LGBTQ world, it's like a femme is like a feminine individual, right? Like then they're soft and butterfly-y, and you know, of course I don't spend a lot of time there, but like, you know, this is what I understand. And then there's effeminate, and now we start getting into like, well, do you want to be an effeminate male? So it's like, why even go near those words as a male, as a that's working on the path to being a man, when there's such a slippery slope? It's like, it's just such
Mm.
a deep pit of treacherous things that can occur, because like we said, before we got on this call, the word is confusion. It's confusing. What does that mean to get in touch with my feminine side? Oh, now I have to go like feel my feelings. Okay, but I firmly and fully deny that I have a feminine side or feminine energy at all, because I don't even believe that feminine energy actually exists. Like, I don't think that that's even a real thing. I think it's a made up concept. I believe in the yogic sciences, yes, but I don't believe that
Mm.
in that science that feminine energy is the way to do it, because it crosses the line into biology and chemistry, and now we're talking about different fields with the same words. It's like they don't use chemistry terms in physics for the most part. Like, they talk about velocity and force, etc. Not, I don't know very know very many chemistry terms, but like, compounds and so on and so forth. Right? This is completely different language. So my war is against the wording, the languaging, and what gets lumped into that category.
So
Like
in
you said,
other
is
words, that
offensive.
the right, yeah, yeah, I think it's offensive. So, for instance, like one of the go-to um, intellectual um, sort of defenses, or the way to prop up this idea that we need to develop the inner feminine, comes from Carl Jung's idea of anima and animus. So a lot of people will, but Carl Jung, and then reference his authority and his thinking. So do you think that those ideas are sound on anima and animus? Are they better to use than masculine and feminine?
To tell you the truth, I haven't really studied the anima and animus philosophy or theories of Jung. I went from like shadow and inner child straight into parts work, so I skipped over a lot of the Jungian model. I
Mm,
did spend a lot of time with archetypes, a lot of time with
right.
visualization through the Mankind Project and these types of things. And then I got into parts work at the suggestion of my teacher, due to where I was at with my mind and my emotions, and he sent me into IFS. So I found that IFS was the best model,
Okay.
and I've met parts of me that were female inside. They were literally showed up as a female image in the process. I don't know if you've ever done a parts work session in this way, where you actually
Mm,
see the part in your mind's eye, like you'll see the inner child, or you'll see the inner critic or whatever as a character. And I've seen female parts. Now, I don't know if they were like spiritual, or if they were a thought form about someone else representing some aspect of me. But anyway, no matter what way you look at it, it's all mental. So I can't speak to the anima and animus as as a as a system, but
okay.
I believe that a lot of those models that I've seen, through my work looking at archetypes, et cetera, and Jungian stuff and psychology and how the mind works, but also through the yogic lens, because this is where I'm more trained in of these things. There's a book called Many Minds, Oneself, and they talk a lot
Mm,
about how Jungian stuff and parts work overlaps. So if anybody wanted to sort of get a background on how I perceive it, it's like, that's a good book to look at. I would imagine they overlap well, but I really think that all those models with super self and ego self and it's made way too confusing. Again, we're back to the word confusing. I'm like, go look at a
mm,
parts work model. It's
right.
parts and self.
'Cause-
It's really easy.
Yeah, because I think a lot of what we're trying to parse out here, like one thing is the experience that we have in observing men and also ourselves, and what really works. And this particular frame is turning out to not work very well. So that's one thing. But I think as well, we're in a conversation of, shall we say, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that there's something that entered into the zeitgeist through all of these, weed smoking, Woodstock kind of people who got into altered states, and they played with Eastern spirituality, and something started to funnel its way into the West, and maybe not in the most skilled and adequate ways. And I think that's part of the problem. But it's like, I think one of the things, Ryan, is like, okay, so if you actually have feminine parts inside of you, you experience them in parts work, doesn't that mean that you have an inner feminine? Like, where do we end up with the language around these things?
So the parts of me that showed up as like four hooded females, which I believed were like on the spiritual levels. Like it was like they felt like goddesses, not like they didn't feel like parts of me. They showed up in a parts work session, but they didn't feel like parts of me. And the other parts that had showed up that in female form were always like
Mm,
the my mother or grandmother or a female partner and her inner child at the time. So I don't believe that they're actually my parts. They may have been, but I don't. None of them
right.
ever. And
Okay.
there's a certain texture of like, this is me, this is mine. I feel this, and so I don't know, like in sort of the deep quantum psychology levels of how that works. Of like, were these spiritual beings, these four females that showed up? You know, they're kind of like the four directions, the four archetypes of the female. Like, they all have a very different feeling to them. And you know, were these my mother as a little girl
Mm,
or my grandmother as a little girl or ancestors coming in these sessions or a partner who was a little girl, like were they representations? I mean, this goes deep into parts work theory because I think the mind is just finding whatever it's been programmed to create as an image to exemplify traits and values and experiences and so on. So I don't, even though most of the parts that I see in a parts work session are
right.
male, often they're, one of them is a metallic ball. It's not male or female. One of them is a yesterday I met this like slug
Mm.
type Jabba the Hutt creature that represented something in my gut space. So I don't think that just because they show up as an image of
Do you do
something that
this
they're
every
actually
day, or?
masculine or feminine or male or female. It's just an image because of the way that the mind was programmed in the first 7 years
Mm.
of life and subsequent to that. So I don't believe that that means that there's a masculine or feminine within, like uh that these, and my war is also not even just against the word feminine energy, it's masculine energy, because it all goes back to like how I look at it. It's like hard or soft. This is way better terminology because it doesn't connect at all with biology, right? Hard or soft psyche. Like
Mm.
I'm ferocious, I'm aggressive, I'm confident. These are, when we look at the archetypes and king, warrior, magician, lover, it's like the inflated or the deflated shadows. But it's like a healthy psyche can be more of an inflated or
Mm.
a deflated psyche as well. Like the introvert or extrovert, like maybe it's from
Well,
shadow,
it's
but
also
maybe that's
penetrative
their
and receptive.
true essence. What's a true essence? Another deep conversation.
Mm. From where I'm sitting now, it appears that we have a really shoddy connection. But again, I hope that the connection for the people who watch is okay. Yeah, we're getting some comments here. One guy's writing, yeah, some names here, and there's a woman saying Cesarini. This is very interesting from a Rudolf Steiner perspective. He speaks about that the etheric body of a man is feminine and vice versa for a woman. Yeah, well, a lot of people speak about a lot of things, eh? It may or may not be true. I don't know, but I think for me, the more important thing at this point in time is what I see actually work for the men that I work with. I think that's where the rubber hits the road. Like, so you can have a really high level conceptual conversation, but I think in a way, the way that I prefer to work is that I see what really works and then I reverse engineer why is it working. And so I'd love to understand why you feel, Ryan, that why you're so bloody convinced that it might be hurtful or damaging to for a man to believe that he has to integrate the inner feminine. Where does that certainty come from?
like you said, I think we have a bad connection. So if you could repeat your question, because I don't want to pick apart the words that I did here and and answer the wrong question. So would you repeat that?
I'll try. Yeah. I said that it's clear that you're very convinced that, or at least based on your writing, you're very convinced that the idea for a man to integrate his inner feminine might be hurtful or damaging. Why are you so convinced about that?
I believe it may or likely would be. Obviously, everything's circumstantial or situational. Like, I can't say that this is only the way and it's going to be like this for every single male on the path to becoming a man, but trends, of course. So
Mm,
I believe that it's likely to be damaging. Now, damaging would be a scale, whether it's confusing and delays his manifestation of his purpose or some sort of strength and service in the world because it's confusing. And
mm,
I could go all the way into where it becomes an identity crisis and he kills himself. Because who am I? Andrew Tate's telling me I need
yeah.
to have Ferraris, and then all the spiritual people are telling me I need to cry and be held by women and follow women around. So it's like, what's true? And when we go all the way back to biology, and I'm bigger than my sisters, you know, why is that? Uh, we've been around on this planet for a long time. There's a reason why the biological aspects have gone the way that they've gone. Males have a propensity to be bigger and stronger. Well, if we're hunting and building and fighting wars, it's like, well, of course, that's going to develop over time. So when we lose our core
Mm,
identity, because of cultural or chronological in what's happening in the time period of today, especially like you said, since the 60s, it's like we lose our identity as individuals, but as a collective, we have a collective identity crisis. And so when I say it's damaging, I'm looking at the individuals that I know and work
mm.
with, but more on the larger scale of like,
I
we
believe
don't
that
know who we are
is
anymore.
true.
And when there's these dangerous things happening in the world, call it Russia, call it China, call it the Ukraine, call it the deep state, call it whatever, there's stuff happening. Whoever you want the bad guy to be, each person watching this, there's stuff happening. And when we don't have strength and masculinity that's clear and it knows who it is, it's a very dangerous game to play. So when I say damaging, I mean, well, yeah, directly to the individual,
Yeah.
but and that's a whole rabbit hole, but I'm
Yeah.
talking about to the
I really
survival of the
agree.
species as well.
Is this is actually one of the
And
things
like,
that
really, like, we
I
all have a
found
mind, we all
offensive
have
during
emotion.
the pandemic, where oh, you have a bad connection again.
Hmm? Go ahead.
Mm. I don't know how many seconds we're out of sync at this point, but no, what I was going to say was you were referencing how this is actually important for the survival of the species, and I like those are big words, but I actually think they're true. And I personally felt like I had a glimpse of that over the pandemic period. Um, I, that was it was a period of a lot of disillusionment where a lot of people with beautiful teachings did nothing in the face of emerging tyranny, and they didn't even see that it was happening. And to this day, it's shocking to me that you couldn't that you would normalize Stephen Colbert dancing around in a plastic syringe and singing like a musical number on the wonders of vaccines. It was so ridiculous. The propaganda was so ridiculous, and yet these inner feminine people, they were like, yeah, bend over, let me have it. Where was the spine? I think I learned a lot about what this inner feminine teaching actually led to in practice over these last years. So now when I hear somebody represent this teaching, I'm like, okay, so show me what you're made of, because this teaching hasn't proven to be very valuable over these last years. Like, okay, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? It's like, is there a core in you? Are you willing to stand as the one voice of dissent in a group full of people telling you that you're wrong? Are you willing to do that? Or are you weak as fuck kind of guy? Are you, is that who you are? Because you you want to practice reception as the whole room is penetrating you with their confusion, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm confused myself. This is an important conversation to have, and I think um it's fair to say that we as a male um sex gender, we have a lot to live up to right now, and we're not doing it yet. Like, we're actually in a very dangerous time period, and I think um that this is the time, Ryan. Personally, I think so. It's like we can't let go of the achievements that we've made over the last several decades of opening our heart, learning about attunement and sensitivity, and so on and so forth. And nobody is arguing in for that, at least not here on this call. Um, but if you can't move beyond your own emotions and actually be a container for yourself and for your family and your wife and your kids, and you say, this may suck right now, but I'm going to fucking do it because it's the right thing to do. If we aren't able to do that as men, we're not actually men. I think by that point, we just have to accept that now we're boys. We have adult bodies, but on a psychological level, we haven't become men yet. So yeah, I'm with you. It's like it's of a
That's it.
species wide importance. Yeah, I think we we see eye to eye on this. There was another comment here. I don't know if you can see the comments on your end, Ryan, but Seth shared another comment here. I have been around many men who believe in the idea that you two now speak out against, and now, when I think about it, they are all weak in their masculinity. I don't think that's a coincidence. Mhm. Uh, Does that feel complete, Ryan, or do you have more to share?
There's one final piece for me, which is I think, I believe, I perceive that for males, the first and primary goal is to become a man. We've been talking about initiations for thousands of years, doing initiations. The stuff
Mm,
has been in the men's movement for 50 years, whatever it's been. And that's always been the conversation. How does a boy become a man? And so now, this, of course, then gets into trauma and then gets into childhood and all of that. I understand. But to me, the man must become a man before doing the trauma work. But the trauma work is what is in the way of becoming a man sometimes for some people. And I think what the most important thing that needs to be said here from me is that at the end of the at the end of the day, this whole conversation can go a lot of different directions and a lot of different levels, even into etheric body and God's plan and what religion are we talking about and all sorts of things. But the bottom line is that when you go into your trauma and you don't have a frame of discipline, routine, clarity of purpose, you can get lost in there and you can end up dead. And so when people go do the work, quote unquote, this conversation starts happening. Get in touch with your feminine side. And those who are already lost can get pulled into something that can take them to death, because there's a lot in that trauma sphere
mm,
for some people, of course. There's a lot down there.
mm,
So when a male or a man has a routine, a physical practice, a group of men who are in their masculine, they challenge him, they hold him, they do not let him fall into these pits, then it's the time to go into the deep traumatic emotional stuff. When you have a foundation around you, a container around you, you've created it in your routine and you have it in your space, whether it's friends or whether it's your hockey team or whether it's your men's group. And then, yes, clean up your trauma, get in touch with your emotions. Like, feel them fully all the way to completion. Learn what that means. What is emotional intelligence? What is emotional responsibility? What is emotional power? Like, how to harness these things and transform them into something where you are a monumental force for good on the planet. And that's before all of the and it's not black or white, like one has to come first, and it's always situational, but that's got to be established before anybody goes into anything like that. Is get people around you that are strong, get into routine, get into habit, get eating healthy, get off the screens, the basic stuff. And this is another reason why I'm going against this, because it's so widely talked about. And I'm like, why is nobody talking about the first thing, which is become a man that would go work on the emotional traumas? But don't go there first, because it's
Mhm.
dangerous. I went there first. I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm seeing all the things that didn't
And
work.
I think that is, I think us going there first, well, not only does it reflect the journey of the majority of men in the scene, quote unquote, but I think it's also reflective of the kind of teaching that is provided there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a go-to place. Go and share your childhood wounds and be supported in your pain and get it all out, and somehow magically you will sort of clean your vessel, and then you'll be a man. I don't think so. It's good. Don't get me wrong, to get that stuff
Yep.
out, but it doesn't make you a man. No. Yeah. Okay, I'm a bit bummed that we had such a big struggle with our connection, but Ryan, when I end this stream, if you stay on it, then your end of the conversation will upload to the StreamYard server, and then if this recording was like terrible quality, or if the live stream was terrible quality, I can upload it as a recording for the guys who are interested. Um, but yeah, thank you. I think there's just so much to speak about here, and for me, I just wanted to riff a little bit with you, but maybe there'll be future conversations on this topic as well, because this is not reframing this conversation is not going to happen in half an hour, shall we say. Mhm. Yeah, I don't know if we have a connection at all, actually. All right. I'm just going to take a leadership decision here, since I basically can't see or hear Ryan at all. I'm just going to say thank you to everyone who chose to be part of this, and sorry for the technology. I don't know exactly why we're struggling with the technology, because we're both sitting on stellar internet connection, as far as I know. But it is what it is. So maybe to be continued. We'll see. I think we have a connection again, Ryan. So maybe you can tell the people listening where they can find more about you.
The Matrix doesn't want us to talk about this.
Mm. No, it's like it's a very very bad connection. Can you hear me at all? No. Okay, everyone. Thank you for chiming in. At least we got to
Thanks,
share
Adam.
some ideas, but it was a slightly slightly challenging experience. Have a great weekend, everyone.